I don't think I've ever really felt that what I did was important until very recently. Only because the amount, again, of cognitive dissonance and the amount of sheer disinformation and propaganda, and well, I'll just go ahead and call it what it is, because a lot of what's going on out there, for lack of a better term, a lot of what's going on in the Patriot movement, a lot of what's going on with the Alex Jones show is, for lack of a better term, folks, it is trauma-based mind control. Now, generally we think of trauma-based mind control as events like 9/11, where, the sheer shock and the sheer, menacing power of these events can scare people into giving up everything, giving up all of their rights, all of their well-being, all of their perceived security. And believe me, I don't care who you are, you, me, every person on this rock called Earth, all of us, every single one of us lives under the illusion of perceived security, don't we? I mean, really. Are any of us ever really safe from anything? I mean, you could get struck by lightning tomorrow. David Rockefeller could get struck by lightning tomorrow. Barack Obama could be struck by lightning tomorrow. Benjamin Netanyahu could, slip getting out of the bathtub and crack his head open. One of the Rothschilds could choke on their filet mignon. I mean, what I'm saying is, aren't we all really living under the guise of perceived security? I mean, what do people think? Oh, well, as long as we have the government keeping us safe from Al Qaeda, and they're doing their job and doing everything they can, regardless of how many freedoms we have to give up to keep us safe from Al Qaeda, then I can sleep well at night? I don't understand that. And so you in the Patriot movement, you have even more trauma-based mind control, because you have people who are being traumatized and hammered over the head, by a screaming baboon about how the end is nya, over and over and over again, and fear-mongered into the floor, and people just become traumatized into believing that the sky is falling, as Chicken Little often likes to tell us. And so, that's why it's so important right now that that there are other voices out there, and it's just amazing to me how scared people are of any sort of contrary information that doesn't get put out by people like Alex Jones and the mainstream intelligentsia of the truth community. I mean, so much hate. I mean, I've never seen anything like it in all my life. One piece of information that you say that is contrary to something that they believe or they heard on the Alex Jones show, and they call you every name under the sun: Fed, spook, infiltrator, COINTELPRO, with absolutely zero proof, with absolutely nothing to back it up. Because they don't give a goddamn about information. They don't give a goddamn about the truth. They don't give a goddamn whether you live or die or what happened to this planet or our species or anything else. They could give a fuck less. You understand? They care about status and money and power and their own personal well-being in this illusionary material world where none of that matters when you're 6 feet under. And, I think it's all going to backfire eventually. I really do. They've exposed themselves in a large way to the point where, people are even seeing through the bullshit artists of the alleged truth movement. I mean, people are finally starting to see through that in many ways because of the things they've done to expose themselves. I still can't believe that people would give any sort of credibility with Alex Jones after to me, the biggest thing ever was that whole Charlie Sheen Obama thing where, I remember watching the video before it happened where he said, this is the biggest story I've ever had. We're going to have the biggest announcement. He used the terms mainstream news big. It's going to be global, gigantic story that's going to go on all the mainstream news. And then, waited 2 or 3 days before he told everybody it was a hoax. Charlie Sheen comes on his show and says that he, interviewed Barack Obama for 30 minutes and asked him questions about 9/11. And then, they took him 3 days to say, oh, well, it was just fictional. And people bought into it and believed it. And that did wake a lot of people up. A lot of people said, you know what? Fuck this guy. I defended this guy. And then he pulls this hoax. That to me is, you can forget it. I mean, even everything else on top of it, but that alone to me is the big one. That just is, I don't know how anybody could have any credibility. I mean, if I got up here and told you that I had a 30-minute interview with Henry Kissinger and got up here and read you a transcript and then turned around 2 or 3 days later and said, oh, I'm just kidding. By the way, that was just something I made up as, fictional. What if I, interviewed Kissinger or something like that? Do you think that, I can't even imagine. I'd probably be stoned to death. Considering the things that people say about me for things that I report that are true. I mean, my God, you should see some of the venom that's directed towards me for things I say that are provable. Much less if I pulled a stunt like Alex Jones did and told everybody that, here we had this interview with Charlie Sheen and Barack Obama and then turned around 2 days later and told everybody it was a fake. I mean, my God. That to me, I don't give a damn how good much information the guy put out or did or has put out or does put out or anything else. You pulled a con on a lot of well-meaning good people that believed you, and a lot of people repeated that as being true. You damaged the credibility not only of yourself, but a lot of other people out there who took your word at face value, Mr. Jones. That's the whole thing that, to me, is more than anything. You can be a lying sack of shit, and you can be a conniving, money-grubbing, bottom boat owning, John Birch Society Jesuit puppet all you want. That's your business. Go. Hey, it's a free country still. If that's what you got to do to put food on the table for you and your wife and your 4 kids, go on and get it, brother. But you know what? When you start dragging the names of researchers and people who have put their lives on the line for this because they trusted you and took you at your word, you take them for a ride and get them posting fake stories for a couple of days before you admit it. See, that right there is where it's game over. I mean, you want to be a fucking, untrustworthy piece of shit. That's your business. Nobody's going to stop you, Bubba. Go on and do it. But you took a lot of good people for a ride on that deal, and a lot of good people learned their lesson from you. And, that to me, that's what I got mad more about. Again, what do you expect from a dog that flees? I expect that kind of stuff from Jones and whatever. It's, it's his credibility, not yours or mine. But again, there were a lot of people out there who are real credible researchers who put out real info, who basically, there's a lot of webs. Almost probably every truth or mainstream truth radio show, took that as the gospel. Nobody really even questioned it because, he had Charlie Sheen on before. It was almost as if the initial time that he had Charlie Sheen on, it was almost as if that was a prepping for that later event of the alleged, because that happened even before Obama was in office, but it was almost as if they were planning this ahead of time, to set the stage that him and Alex had been, friends for a while and that he was a trustworthy source. As we hadn't heard dick cheese nothing out of fucking Sheen and the truth movement or anything like that since then, have you? No, why? Because nobody in their right mind would believe a goddamn thing that came out of Charlie Sheen's mouth ever again. Why didn't he step up to the plate and say that it was all horse shit? That's what I don't understand. So, that's the whole thing. When you start, you got to understand that I just see it as a blatant abuse of power to me. I saw that move from him as an abuse of position, an abuse of power. And it seemed to me just as low and as bad as anything that a dirty politician would do. And it almost seemed to me as well as if it was something that you would, you know, how they make these guys when they're low level minions, when they're climbing the ladder, you know, politicians and whatnot, they make them do these different stunts. Or, you know what I mean? Like, you know, like they've done with Rand Paul, where Rand Paul says some, you know, some sort of quotation that could or could not be perceived as quote unquote racist. They did the same thing to Ron Paul. You see that, well, they always do that, and they create these little scandals on a low level when they're bringing people up in the ranks. You see, and that's kind of what that whole op smelled like. It smelled like one of these things where, you know, get on, because I did that once on air. I did something not as sinister as that, but I one time I had this story and I covered it on, I was like, you know, I didn't feel like, this is when I first started on air. I've been on air 3 or 4 months. And I felt like nobody was really paying attention and nobody was listening to what I had to say. And I felt like people weren't even really doing their own research or looking stuff up. So one day I had this news story and I went through this whole news story about copper prices in China and all this stuff. And what it was actually from, I was actually reading from something that pertained to a video game, but it sounded like a news story. And there was one of my listeners who, like 2 or 3 days after the initial broadcast, caught that and said, "Hey, I heard you covering that. That wasn't a real story. That was from a video game, blah, blah, blah. That's not even real." And I went, "Congratulations. We have one person in our audience that's paying attention." Because I threw that in there to see if anybody would call me on it or catch me, and nobody did. And you see, that was a test that I did to see if people were paying attention. And that's kind of what that whole Jones fake Charlie Sheen Obama interview thing felt like to me. You know, they're going to see how many people they could get to bite on it. And see, you know, what kind of credibility people gave to the things that Alex Jones says and reported. And in exchange for that, he proves that he can pull a fast one on an audience with a straight face and be believable and have people believe what he says, even though there's really no way to prove it or no way to back it up or anything else. And because so many people believed it, essentially that was a test like, okay, all right, you see, well, this guy can play at our level. This guy can play. He just got, you know, his whole entire listening audience and supporting audience to believe in a story about Charlie Sheen interviewing Barack Obama for 20 minutes or 30 minutes or whatever it was. Even though he didn't have any recordings or anything else, he simply said it was real and everybody believed it was real. And you got to understand, in the position of somebody in the elites, they would say, "Oh, well, that's, you know, it's like a beta. That's good. Okay, well, see, he can get people to believe him without even having to present hard info to them." That, to me, smells like the ultimate test of seeing if somebody can hack it in the mainstream media. And of course, the audio recordings we played earlier in the week where he was praising Fox News and praising Glenn Beck and saying, you know, a year from now, he's going to be hardcore Alex Jones level. He's a truther. He's on our side. And, you know, I mean, that to me, that just proves what we've been saying about the CMP and Glenn Beck and everything all along, because people have always asked me, you know, if Glenn Beck a CMP member, and I just don't know. He certainly has connections to the CMP in the same way that Alex Jones